Hey everyone, before we dive into this raw, twist-filled tale that's been simmering in me for years, I've got a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. It keeps this channel alive, means the world to me, and trust me, you won't want to miss a second of what's coming. It's a wild ride you'll feel deep in your gut. Let's get into it. The dining room glowed under the soft flicker of a chandelier that night in June 2025, its crystals catching the light like tiny prisms, casting shimmers across the polished oak table. I sat in the corner, a glass of red wine in my hand, the deep burgundy swirling like blood under the glow. Laughter bounced off the walls, sharp, jagged, slicing through the air like shards of glass. My husband, David, raised his glass, his voice a honed blade cutting through the hum of the room. "Another month of freelancing flops, huh, darling?" he said, his tone dripping with mock sweetness. "Maybe try a barista gig. Might suit you better." His buddies, Mark, Tyler, and Sam, erupted, their tailored suits crisp, their grins wide, their glasses clinking in a toast to my supposed failure. I dipped my head, letting my dark hair curtain my face, feigning the sting they expected, the embarrassment they fed on. Their amusement gleamed brighter than the chandelier overhead, a spotlight on my humiliation, or so they thought. They didn't know. How could they? David, my husband of 8 years, was the CFO of Apex Dynamics, a tech powerhouse that dominated the cybersecurity market. He lounged in his arrogance, his tie loosened, his hazel eyes glinting with smug delight. Mark, smirking over his gin, was the VP of operations. Tyler, chuckling into his sleeve, ran sales. Sam, leaning back like a king on a throne, headed engineering. Senior executives, untouchable, basking in their power, they thought they ruled the room, the company, the world. I sipped my wine, the taste sharp and bitter on my tongue, masking the faintest curl of a smile. They had no idea who I was. My name is Elena Vos. I'm 39 and I built Apex Dynamics from a single spark of an idea in a cramped studio apartment into a titan that protects half the Fortune 500's data. I'm the CEO, the founder, the one who signs their checks, approves their raises, greenlights their bloated egos. David's been my husband since I was 31, and for 8 years I've played this game, pretending to be the struggling wife, the nobody he props up with his paycheck. Tonight he wielded me like a punchline, same as always. "Who knows, maybe you'll get lucky one day," he crowed, and the table roared again, a pack of hyenas feasting on my misfortune. I traced the rim of my glass with a steady finger, cool against the crystal. They didn't know that in a few hours their smug little empire would crack wide open. The titles they flaunted, mine to strip away. The contracts they bragged about, mine to redirect. Apex Dynamics wasn't theirs. It was mine, always had been. I'd watched them strut for years, blind to the woman in the corner, the one pulling strings while they laughed. David caught my eye for a split second, his grin faltering, a flicker of unease he couldn't place. I smiled back, soft, submissive the way he liked. "Enjoy your night, gentlemen," I said, my voice low, a whisper under their noise. They didn't hear the edge, didn't sense the cliff they were dancing on. Tomorrow everything changes. Tomorrow I step out of the shadows. For now I let them laugh, let them drink, let them think they'd won. The wine was bitter, but victory, that would taste sweeter. Let me take you back, because this isn't just about that night. It's about the years that forged me, the mask I wore, the trap I set. 8 years ago I met David Pierce. I was 31, fresh off launching Apex Dynamics in secret, a startup no one knew about yet, least of all him. He was 34, charming. A finance was climbing the ranks at a rival firm, all easy smiles and sharp suits. I could have told him the truth. I'm Elena Vos, a tech visionary with a company already turning heads in Silicon Valley. Said I lied. I said I was a freelance graphic designer, scraping by on gigs, still figuring it out. He bought it, hook, line, sinker. Asked me out that night over drinks at a dive bar, his hand brushing mine, his laugh warm. 6 months later we were married. It was an experiment. I'd built Apex from nothing. Late nights coding in a studio with peeling paint, pitching to investors who laughed me off. A gamble that paid off when our first client, a mid-tier bank, signed on. But I wanted to see who David really was, what he'd do if he thought I had no power, no status, no threat to his ego. So I rented a modest one-bedroom in Queens, drove a beat-up Honda, dressed in thrift store cardigans and jeans. He didn't question it at first. "You'll figure it out, Elle," he'd say, arms slung around my shoulders, eyes soft as we watched TV on our sagging couch. I'd nod, hiding the smirk, knowing Apex was already outpacing his firm, my bank account swelling under shell companies he'd never trace. That kindness didn't last. Apex grew silently under my real name, Elena Voss, through layers of anonymity I'd crafted with lawyers and proxies. I kept it hidden, feeding David tales of lost clients, failed pitches, a designer's woes. He started to shift. The encouragement faded, replaced by impatience, then pity. "Freelancing's brutal," he'd mutter, scrolling his phone, barely glancing up as I folded laundry in our cramped living room. While downtown in a glass-walled office I never showed him, I signed multi-million-dollar deals with tech giants. I let him think he was the breadwinner, the savior. He moved up, joined Apex Dynamics as CFO. A job I approved through a board that didn't know my face, clueless that his lucky break came from me. I watched him change, saw the man behind the mask emerge. Arrogant, dismissive, cruel. The experiment worked too well. By 39 he didn't just pity me. He despised me, a wife with no career, no ambition, unworthy of his shining pride. Hey, if you're hooked already, and I hope you are, drop a quick subscribe. It's free, keeps me going, and there's so much more to unravel here. The layers are just peeling back. Back to the story. The shift wasn't sudden. It crept in, slow and ugly, over years. David thrived on it, on being the hero in our lopsided story. By 42 he was Apex's golden boy, strutting in tailored suits, flashing a Rolex I'd indirectly funded with my company's profits. Our apartment stayed modest. A 2-bedroom in Brooklyn. He insisted on keeping humble, because he loved the narrative, the noble exec lifting his struggling wife. But the warmth was gone. He'd come home, toss his keys on the counter with a clang, barely glance at me. "Rough day?" I'd ask, stirring pasta on our ancient stove. "You wouldn't get it," he'd snap, pouring a scotch, his tone sharp enough to draw blood. Dinners with his crew, Mark, Tyler, Sam, became his stage. They'd gather at our place or some upscale steakhouse, all sharp ties and sharper tongues, and I'd sit there, quiet, the prop in his play. "Elena's still chasing that big break," he'd say, smirking, and they'd laugh. A chorus of hyenas circling a carcass. Mark would chime in, "Maybe retail's hiring, cashier's a step up." Tyler'd snort, Sam'd raise a glass, and David would bask in it, the spotlight, the power. That night in June was peak performance. The chandelier gleamed, the wine flowed, and David held court. "Barista might be your speed, darling," he said, eyes glinting, voice loud enough to carry over the clinking glasses. The table exploded. Mark slapping the wood, Tyler choking on his drink, Sam grinning like a shark scenting blood. I lowered my head, hair shielding my face, playing the part, my grip tightening on the glass, knuckles whitening, but they didn't see. They didn't feel the air shift. I raced the wine to my lips, slow, deliberate, tasting the bite of it. They were blind. Those promotions they bragged about. I'd signed them. The budgets they controlled. I'd approved them. Apex Dynamics was my creation, my machine, and they were cogs I'd placed. David most of all. He thought he held me up, but I'd been holding him, his career, his life, for years. I set the glass down, a soft clink against the table. "Enjoy it, David," I murmured, too low for them to catch. He didn't need to hear it yet. Tomorrow the curtain lifts. 8 years of his contempt, his games. I'd watched, waited, let him dig his grave. Tonight he toasted my failure, oblivious to the empire beneath my feet. I smiled, small, secret, the kind he'd never notice, while they laughed on, drunk on their own noise, and I sat steady, ready. His reign was done. The shift in David's behavior was my signal. Years of mockery had peeled back his mask, but suspicion wasn't enough. I needed proof, something ironclad to shatter his world and his cronies with it. 3 years ago at 36 I started digging. It began with whispers, overheard boasts at those dinners, offhand comments about side perks and quiet deals. David and his crew, Mark, Tyler, Sam, were sloppy, too comfortable in their power at Apex. I'd built the company to be a fortress, but they were gnawing at its walls and I couldn't let it stand. I hired private investigators, discreet, ruthless, the best money could buy. They tailed David first, shadowing him to late-night meetings in dimly lit bars, places he'd never take me. Photos came back, him shaking hands with execs from rival firms, passing envelopes under tables, his grin smug in the grainy light. Then Mark, caught at a ski chalet party funded by Apex accounts, laughing with vendors who'd overcharged us for years. Tyler followed, secret lunches with competitors, golf courses where deals were whispered over cigars. Sam was last, audio of him berating engineers, threatening jobs over petty slights. The evidence piled up, a paper trail of greed I could have framed as art. But I didn't stop there. Suspicion had teeth now and I gave it claws. I installed a surveillance net within Apex's own systems. An invisible web woven into emails, servers, phone lines. No one noticed. It reported to me, not David, though he'd never suspect it. The data flowed, leaked bid prices to rivals, contracts rigged for kickbacks, company funds siphoned into offshore accounts. One email from David to Mark stood out. "Keep legal off this, she's expendable," about a junior analyst who'd flagged their overbilling. They'd buried her like they buried anyone who didn't bow. What I uncovered wasn't just corruption, it was rot. They weren't content skimming profits. They were selling Apex's secrets piece by piece to line their pockets. Text messages bragged about it, Tyler to Sam. "Another $500,000 in the Caymans, they'll never trace it." Video clips showed Mark mocking staff in meetings, his voice dripping disdain. I found audio of David on a call laughing, "Keeping the wife in the dark's the easy part. Wait till you see this bonus." Every file, every recording was a brick in the wall I'd build to crush them. I sat in my hidden office, a rented loft downtown, the city's hum faint through the windows, sifting through it all. 3 years of watching, waiting, documenting had turned suspicion into a weapon. I had enough to send them to jail, but that wasn't the plan, not yet. Apex was mine and I'd reclaim it first, strip them bare before the world. If this twist has you leaning in, and I bet it does, hit that subscribe button now. It's free and it'll keep you locked in for what's next. The payoff's coming and it's massive. Let's keep rolling. The evidence was a vault, locked and loaded, but I craved the raw truth of their world, how they treated the powerless, the ones they deemed beneath them. At 39 I crafted Sarah Klein, a struggling nobody with a fake resume, modest blazer, scuffed flats, a nervous smile. I applied to Apex Dynamics, my own company, for an entry-level data clerk job. The application went through HR, a team I'd built but who'd never met me. Days later an email pinged. "Interview scheduled 9th floor Thursday." I smiled, they had no idea. I walked into the conference room, hair pulled back, shoulders hunched just enough, clutching a worn folder. 3 faces I knew stared back. Mark, Tyler, Sam, David's inner circle, sprawled in their chairs like judges at a trial. Mark flipped through my resume, sneering. "Unemployed for a bit, how, Sarah? Rough go?" His tone was a jab, testing me. I nodded, voice soft, timid. "Yes, it's been tough finding the right fit." Tyler leaned forward, sizing me up, a smirk tugging his lips. "Mark, it's brutal. We see hundreds better than this." Sam didn't hide his boredom, scrolling his phone while I spoke. They didn't ask about skills, just probed for weakness, something to mock. I fed it to them, stumbling over answers, letting my hands fidget. Mark cut in sharp. "Why should we bother with you?" I mumbled about diligence, effort, words they didn't care to hear. Halfway through their phones buzzed, one after another. Sam chuckled, glancing at the screen. "You've got to be kidding," he muttered, smirking at Tyler. I didn't need to look. David had texted them, probably watching from his office, laughing at Sarah, the loser his wife could have been. They grinned wider, feeding off it. The interview lasted 15 minutes. They spent 10 tearing me apart. Tyler flicked my resume aside like trash. "We'll be in touch," he said, voice dripping with fake pity. Mark stood, already dismissing me. Sam didn't look up. I thanked them, head bowed, and shuffled out, the perfect picture of defeat. The door clicked shut and I straightened in the hall, a faint smile breaking through. I didn't need their callback. I'd seen it all. Their contempt, their casual cruelty, the toxic swamp they'd made of my company. Back in my car, I shed Sarah like a skin, scuffed flats kicked off, my real heels stashed under the seat. They thought they'd humiliated me, but I'd walked away with gold. First-hand proof of their rot, a culture built on disdain. It matched the files, the harassment, the power trips. Only now it was personal. I'd felt their scorn and it fueled me. The trap was closing and they were too blind to hear it snap. The next morning I didn't sneak in as Sarah Klein through some back door. I walked through Apex's main lobby, heels clicking on marble, past employees who nodded politely, unaware of the storm I carried. At 39 I'd spent years in the shadows, but today I'd step into the light. The boardroom was ready, shareholders summoned, executives gathered, a massive screen looming behind my chair. I sat at the head, calm, a thick folder in front of me waiting. The doors swung open and David strode in, 42 smug, his crew trailing like loyal dogs. They thought this was routine, another meeting to applaud their genius. David settled into the CFO's seat, flashing that grin I'd come to loathe, then saw me. His eyes flickered, confusion, a crack in the mask. Mark raised an eyebrow, Tyler shifted, Sam smirked, still clueless. No one spoke. They didn't understand yet, couldn't fathom why David's freelancer wife sat at the helm. I let the silence stretch, heavy, suffocating. "Sit down, David," I said, voice cold, cutting through the room like a blade. "You and your friends will want to hear this." He hesitated, jaw tight, but obeyed, his crew following, chairs scraping awkwardly. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him, every trace of the timid Elena he knew gone. "Before we begin, I'd like to reintroduce myself." A pause, deliberate, letting it sink in. "I am Elena Voss, founder and CEO of Apex Dynamics." The air vanished. David's face drained, Mark's smirk froze, Tyler's hands twitched, Sam's phone slipped from his grip. Shock rippled, then panic. I clicked a button and the screen blazed to life. Emails, texts, recordings, transactions. A flood of their sins laid bare. "For 3 years I've gathered evidence of your misconduct," I said, tone unwavering, each word a hammer. "Every illegal deal, every dollar you stole, every secret you sold to rivals." Screenshots flashed. David's kickback emails, Mark's chalet receipts, Tyler's bid-rigging texts, Sam's harassment clips. Gasps rose from the shareholders. "I have it all. Your abuse of power, your lies, even the way you crushed anyone who dared speak up." David's mouth opened, no sound came out. He was drowning. "You thought you were untouchable," I continued, standing now, my presence filling the room, "but only because I let you think that." I picked up the termination papers, 4 crisp sheets, one for each, signed them with a steady hand and slid them across the table. "Effective immediately, you're fired from Apex Dynamics." David shot up, face red, voice a rasp. "You can't do this, I'm the CFO. I built this place." I cut him off, sharp, final. "You built nothing. I created this company. I hired you. I let you into my life, and now I'm throwing you out." He staggered back, eyes wild, turning to Mark, Tyler, Sam for backup. They shrank, heads down, abandoning him. The folder stayed closed, the screen spoke enough. "Security's waiting," I said, nodding to the doors. They creaked open, uniformed figures stepping in. David trembled, staring at me like I was a stranger he'd mocked for years. But now I was the one he feared. "Leave quietly, David," I said, unflinching, "before I make this worse." The room held its breath as their reign ended and mine began. The boardroom doors shut behind them, security leading David and his crew out like broken toys. I didn't watch them go. I didn't need to. From the upper floors I glimpsed the lobby through glass panels. Employees clustered, whispering, peering as the once mighty execs were escorted past. David's head hung low, Mark's swagger gone, Tyler and Sam trailing like ghosts. News spread fast, a wildfire through Apex. By noon, headlines screamed, "Purge at Apex Dynamics. CFO and execs axed in corruption sting." Social media lit up, unearthing tales of their arrogance and abuse I hadn't even touched. Their fall was swift, brutal, deserved. Within hours, David's access to Apex systems was cut, his office packed into boxes by staff who'd once flinched at his voice. Mark, Tyler, and Sam faced the same, belongings dumped curbside, badges voided. Rival firms called, but not to hire. Nobody wanted their stench. A week later, word trickled back. David's prenup left him with scraps after I filed for divorce. Mark's condo hit the market. Tyler's car got repossessed. Sam's lawyer scrambled to dodge lawsuits. They crumbled, their luxurious lives unraveling like cheap thread. Apex didn't stumble, it soared. The purge was a signal, a cleansing. Stock prices ticked up by midday, investors buzzing with confidence in my sudden leadership. Contracts I'd held back flooded in. Partners who'd shunned us under David's reign now clamored to sign. The boardroom silence turned to applause after they left, shareholders shaking my hand, stunned but grateful. I'd cut the cancer out and the body healed fast. Employees lingered in the halls, eyes wide, some smiling, relief replacing years of tension. That night I stood in my office, Manhattan's skyline glinting beyond the window, the weight of 8 years lifting. David was nothing now, a name erased from Apex's legacy, his crew footnotes in a cautionary tale. I hadn't just won. I'd reclaimed what was mine, not with cruelty but with precision. The folder of evidence sat on my desk, untouched since the meeting. I'd send it to the SEC later, let the law finish them. For now it was enough to see their empire turn to ash while mine rose stronger. Hey, if this twist has you on edge, and I know it's a lot, subscribe now. It's free and there's more to come. The next chapter's just beginning. Let's keep going. This wasn't the end, it was a beginning. Apex had been theirs to poison, but now it was mine to rebuild. The next day I called an all-company meeting, stepping onto a stage in the atrium, facing thousands who'd only known me as David's shadow. At 39 I shed that skin. I'm Elena Voss, I said, voice steady, echoing off glass walls, founder and CEO. We're starting over, and no one gets left behind. Murmurs rippled, then applause, tentative then fierce. They'd suffocated under David's reign, now they could breathe. Rebuilding began fast. I fired every enabler. HR drones who'd ignored complaints, managers who'd kissed David's ring. Their desks emptied by noon, replaced with talent I'd scouted or wronged souls I brought back. Javier Ruiz was first. A 32-year-old coder David had axed for pushing back on a shady project. I called him myself. You serious? He asked, voice wary. I don't just want you back, I said. I want you leading our encryption team. A week later he walked in head high, no fear in his step. Others followed, 15 former employees pushed out by David's clique, now reinstated with purpose. The culture shifted under my hands. I tore down the old rules, built new ones. Transparency policies, an anonymous reporting system, ethics training for every manager. No more backroom deals, no more silence. I launched a mentorship program, pairing veterans with new hires, especially women in tech who'd been sidelined too long. Meetings changed. No condescending snickers, just ideas, voices rising without dread. One afternoon I passed the break room. Javier's team laughed over a prototype, passion in their eyes. Apex wasn't David's playground anymore. It was mine, a place for creation, not destruction. Results came quick. 2 months in, we signed 4 major contracts. One with a defense firm David had alienated. Stock climbed 40%, investors who'd wavered now clamoring to back me. A Forbes piece called me the woman who rebuilt Apex, but the numbers weren't what hit deepest. It was the quiet moments, walking halls where smiles replaced tension, knowing I'd cut the rot and planted something real. 6 months later, standing by my office window, the city sprawling under a night sky, I felt it, peace. Apex glowed below, floors buzzing with drive, a company reborn. David faded while we rose. Word drifted back he was 42, a cashier at a strip mall electronics store, banned from tech by his termination terms. No suits, no Rolex, just a polyester vest and a barcode scanner. The divorce left him in a studio apartment, his charm hollowed out, eyes vacant. Mark Tyler, Sam fared no better. Blacklisted, broke, their names poison. They were ghosts, irrelevant, while Apex thrived without them. I didn't track them, didn't need to. Revenge was the spark. But the fire burned brighter now, fueled by justice, by the company I'd reclaimed and the people I'd lifted. I looked back sometimes. David's first smile when we met, those dinners where I swallowed his jabs, the boardroom where I broke him. It felt distant, a story I'd outgrown. I'd spent too long in his shadow, letting him think he owned me, but not anymore. Apex's expansion proved it. New partnerships in Europe, Javier's team outpacing goals. That mentorship program pulling young talent from obscurity into power. 6 months after the fall, I stood in a boardroom again. Not for a purge but to plan new markets, new dreams. Employees chatted in the halls, fearless, alive. That's when it clicked. True revenge isn't tearing down, it's building up. I turned Apex into a symbol, not of David's greed but of fairness, innovation, people who wouldn't be silenced. Leaning against my window, the city's pulse steady below, Apex's profits hit a record. But the Real win was deeper. The laughter in the break room, the trust in the air. David thought he'd define me, but he'd only forged me sharper. I didn't need to see him crumble to know I'd won. I felt it in every step, every deal, every life I'd changed. This was my empire, my legacy, and it was only the beginning. Hey, if that hit you as hard as it hit me living it, and I know it's a journey, subscribe now. I've got more raw, real stories of grit, betrayal, and triumph coming your way, and I'd love you along for the ride. What would you have done? Played the long game like me? Struck back sooner? Let me know in the comments. I'm dying to hear your take. See you in the next one.